I'm 81 years old and I spent 40 years sleeping next to a stranger. We shared a bed, we shared a house, we shared a last name, but we didn't share a life, not really. I stayed in a loveless marriage for 4 decades, and I need to tell you what that cost me before I run out of time to say it. People always ask why someone stays in a marriage that's dead. They think it must be dramatic, abuse or addiction or some terrible secret. Sometimes it is, but for me, it wasn't like that. Robert never hit me. He never screamed. He never cheated, as far as I know. He just didn't love me, and I didn't love him. We were polite strangers who happened to live in the same house. That's what 40 years looks like when you're too afraid to leave. I met Robert when I was 26, late by the standards of 1969. Most of my friends were already married, already had babies, already had the life everyone said I should want. I was starting to panic, not because I was desperate for marriage, but because everyone kept asking, my mother, my aunts, the women at church, "When are you going to settle down? Don't you want a family? You're not getting any younger." I started to believe something was wrong with me, that maybe I was too picky, too romantic, too unrealistic, that I needed to grow up and accept what was available. Robert was 32, stable. He had a good job at an insurance company. He didn't drink much. He went to church. He was exactly what I was supposed to want. We dated for 8 months. He was polite, dependable. He showed up when he said he would, but there was no spark. No electricity when he touched my hand, no butterflies when he called, no moments where I couldn't wait to see him. I told myself that was childish, that real love wasn't about butterflies and sparks, that was just movies and romance novels. Real love was practical, steady, safe. So when he proposed, I said yes. I remember standing in my apartment after he left, looking at the ring on my finger, and feeling absolutely nothing. Not joy, not excitement, not even relief, just nothing. I should have known then, but I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I didn't want to be the girl who turned down a perfectly good man for no reason. Because how do you explain that you just don't feel anything? How do you tell people you're rejecting stability and security because something indefinable is missing? I couldn't. So I walked down the aisle in a white dress, smiled for photos, cut the cake. And I felt like I was watching someone else's life, like I was a guest at my own wedding. I remember the reception, people dancing, laughing, telling us how perfect we were together. And I stood there in my white dress, Robert's arm around my waist, and I felt this creeping dread, this voice in my head saying, "What have you done?" But it was too late. Everyone was so happy for us. How could I admit I'd made a terrible mistake? The first year wasn't terrible. We were both on our best behavior, polite, considerate. We didn't fight, but we didn't talk either. Not really. We'd have dinner and discuss the weather, his day at work, the groceries we needed, surface things. I'd try sometimes. I'd ask him what he thought about something, a book I'd read, a news story, what he dreamed about. He'd give me short answers, then go back to his newspaper. After a while, I stopped trying. I remember the exact moment I realized our marriage was empty. It was a Tuesday night. We'd been married 18 months. I'd had the worst day. My car broke down. I'd gotten soaked in the rain. I'd spilled coffee on my only good skirt. I walked in the door almost in tears, desperate to tell someone about my terrible day. Robert was reading the paper at the kitchen table. I started to tell him what happened. He made a sound, a grunt. Eyes never left the newspaper. I stopped mid-sentence, stood there in my wet clothes, and realized he hadn't actually heard a word I'd said. I went upstairs, changed, and cried in the bathroom. That's when I knew I was married to someone who didn't actually care about my day, my life, me. But I pushed it down, told myself I was being dramatic, that he was just tired, that all marriages go through phases. I got pregnant 2 years in. I thought maybe a baby would fix things, give us something to connect over. Everyone said it would bring us closer. It didn't. Robert was a decent father in the practical sense. He provided. He didn't complain about the expense. He helped with the big things when I asked. But he never got up in the middle of the night, never rocked our daughter to sleep, never seemed particularly interested in her beyond making sure she was fed and clothed. I was alone in that house with a screaming baby and a husband who came home, ate dinner, and retreated to the den to watch television. Every single night, I put the baby down, clean the kitchen, sit on the couch, and he'd be in the den, door closed, TV on. I'd sit there by myself and wonder if this was it, if this was what the rest of my life would look like. sitting alone in a house full of people. We had 2 more children. I don't know why. Maybe I thought more children would fill the emptiness. Maybe I just didn't know what else to do with my life. Maybe it's what was expected. But with each child, the distance between us grew. We became functional partners, roommates raising children together. He worked. I took care of the house and kids. We split responsibilities. We were efficient. But we weren't connected. I can count on one hand the number of real conversations we had in 40 years, the kind where you really talk, where you're vulnerable, where you let someone see who you actually are. We never had that. I didn't know what he was afraid of, what he wanted, what kept him up at night. And he never asked about me. Not once in 40 years did he ask me what I wanted from life, what made me happy, what I dreamed about. It was like I was furniture, necessary, functional, but not worth noticing. There were years when we barely spoke at all beyond logistics. Did you pay the electric bill? The car needs an oil change. Your mother called. That was it. That was our marriage. I remember our 10th anniversary. We went to dinner, a nice restaurant, got dressed up, sat across from each other and had nothing to say. We ordered, we ate, we made small talk with the waiter, and then we went home. I cried in the bathroom that night while he watched the news. I was 38 years old and I felt ancient, used up, invisible. I thought about leaving. I thought about it a lot, actually. I'd lie awake at night and imagine packing a bag, getting in the car, driving somewhere new, starting over, being free. But where would I go? I hadn't worked in years. I had 3 kids, no money of my own, and everyone would ask why. What did he do? Did he hurt you? Did he cheat? And I'd have to say no. He didn't do anything. He's just not there. How do you explain that to people? How do you explain that the worst kind of loneliness is being married to someone who doesn't see you? People understand physical abuse, infidelity, addiction, but emotional absence, indifference, that's harder to explain. It sounds petty, ungrateful, like you're complaining about nothing, but it's not nothing, it's everything. So I stayed through my 40s, through my 50s, through my 60s. I told myself it was for the kids, that they needed stability, an intact family, a father in the house. But the truth is, I was scared of starting over, scared of being alone, scared of what people would say, scared of admitting I'd wasted years in a marriage that was dead on arrival, so I stayed in a marriage that was already over, that had maybe never really begun. And I lost myself, piece by piece, year by year. I stopped wearing makeup. What was the point? He never looked at me anyway. I stopped buying new clothes, stopped getting my hair done. I stopped having opinions, stopped expressing preferences, stopped taking up space. I became smaller and smaller until I was barely there at all, just a ghost moving through the house, cooking, cleaning, existing, but not living. I stopped hoping he'd notice me, stopped hoping he'd ask how I was feeling, stopped hoping he'd reach for my hand or kiss me goodnight or say something, anything, that made me feel like I mattered to him. I stopped hoping. And when you stop hoping, something inside you dies, not all at once, slowly. So slowly, you don't even notice until one day you wake up and realize you're just going through the motions. You're not living, you're just surviving, getting through each day, each week, each year, waiting for something to change. But nothing ever did. There were moments when I caught glimpses of what life could have been. I'd see couples at the grocery store laughing together over which cereal to buy. I'd watch elderly couples holding hands at the park. I'd read books about passionate, consuming love and think, I'll never know what that feels like. I had a friend, Margaret, who got divorced when we were both in our early 50s. Everyone in our circle was scandalized, talked about her behind her back, said she was selfish, that she was throwing away a perfectly good marriage. But I saw her a year later and she looked alive. She'd lost weight, started painting again. She was laughing. Actually laughing. She told me she'd rather be alone and happy than married and miserable. And I felt this pang of envy so strong it almost knocked me over, because she'd been brave enough to leave, and I wasn't. I went home that night and looked at Robert sitting in his chair, television on, completely oblivious to my existence. And I thought, I could leave. I could do what Margaret did. But then I thought about the kids, the house, what people would say, and I stayed. That happened probably 5 or 6 times over the years, moments where I almost left, where I got close to being brave, but I always talked myself out of it, always found a reason to stay. And now I can't get those moments back. My daughter fell in love when she was 28. I watched her with her boyfriend, now her husband, the way they looked at each other, the way they finished each other's sentences, the way they touched casually, constantly, like they couldn't help it. And I felt this deep, aching grief, because I never had that. I never will. She asked me once, before she got engaged, if her father and I were happy. I was 63 years old. I looked at my daughter so full of life and hope, and I lied. I said yes. I said marriage takes work, but it's worth it. I said all the things mothers are supposed to say, and she believed me. She got married. She's happy. Her husband adores her, and I'm glad. But sometimes I wonder what she would have done if I'd told her the truth. If I'd said, "No, sweetheart, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy in 40 years. Don't settle. Don't stay in something that makes you feel invisible. Don't be like me." Would it have changed anything? I don't know. But I didn't give her the chance to know the truth. I protected the lie, the same way I'd been protecting it for decades, pretending everything was fine, pretending I wasn't dying inside, pretending that a marriage without love was enough. It wasn't. Robert had a stroke 3 years ago. He was 79. I was 78. It was massive. He never regained consciousness. He died 4 days later. Everyone said how sorry they were, how hard it must be after 51 years of marriage, how devastating to lose your partner. I stood at his funeral and felt nothing. No grief. No relief. No anger. Just nothing. We'd been nothing to each other for so long that his death barely registered. I cried at the funeral because people expected it. But I wasn't crying for him. I was crying for myself, for the 51 years I'd wasted, for the life I never got to live, for the woman I might have been if I'd been brave enough to leave. After he died, people kept telling me how lucky I was, that at least we'd had all those years together, that at least I wasn't alone for most of my life, that at least I had the memories. And I wanted to scream, because I was alone. For 51 years, I was desperately, achingly alone. Being in a loveless marriage is worse than being by yourself. At least when you're single, you have hope that someday you'll meet someone. When you're married to someone who doesn't love you, that hope is gone. You're locked in, trapped with someone who makes you feel more alone than you'd be in an empty house. I've been widowed for 3 years now. People ask if I'm lonely. The truth is, I'm less lonely now than I ever was when he was alive. At least now the emptiness makes sense. Before, I had all the trappings of companionship with none of the actual connection. Now I just have myself. And I'm learning that's not as terrible as I thought it would be. Actually, it's better. I can watch what I want on television, eat when I'm hungry, go to bed when I'm tired. I don't have to tiptoe around someone's moods. Don't have to wonder if today will be the day he finally sees me. Don't have to perform. For the first time in my adult life, I can just be. It's sad that it took him dying for me to feel that freedom, but it's the truth. But I'm 81 years old. Most of my life is gone. I spent 51 years in a marriage that slowly suffocated me, and I can't get that time back. I look at my life and I try to find the good parts, the moments that made it worthwhile, my children, my grandchildren, a few friendships. But when I'm honest with myself, really honest, I have to admit something terrible. I wasted my life. I had one life, one chance, one span of years between birth and death, and I spent it in a prison of my own making. I was never physically trapped. I could have left at any time, but I was psychologically trapped. By fear, by shame, by the belief that leaving would make me a bad person, by the belief that staying was noble, that suffering in silence was virtuous. It wasn't. It was just cowardice. I was too afraid to choose myself, too afraid to admit I'd made a mistake, too afraid to start over, and that fear cost me everything. I never knew what it felt like to be truly loved, to have someone look at me like I hung the moon, to feel chosen, cherished, seen. I never felt passion, never felt that all-consuming desire to be with someone. Never had those conversations that last until 3 in the morning because you can't stop talking. Never had anyone who really knew me, the real me, not the version I performed for the world. I never got to be myself in my own home. I was always performing, always hiding, always small, for 51 years. That's what staying in a loveless marriage cost me. It cost me my identity, my joy, my sense of self-worth, my belief that I deserved to be loved. It cost me experiencing real intimacy, not just physical, though that was absent too. Emotional intimacy, being known by someone, being understood, having someone care about the small details of your day, having someone notice when you're sad, when you're happy, when you're struggling. I never had that. It cost me my life, and I can't get it back. I see young women now in their 30s and 40s staying in marriages that are clearly over. I see the dead look in their eyes, the forced smiles, the way they talk about their husbands with this careful neutrality. Never affection, never warmth, just careful words. I want to shake them. I want to tell them what I know now, that staying doesn't make you noble, that suffering doesn't make you a good person, that you don't get a prize for enduring something that destroys you. I want to tell them that their children know. Kids aren't stupid. They can feel the coldness, the distance, the lack of love. My daughter admitted to me last year that she always knew her father and I weren't really happy, that the house always felt tense, empty, that she couldn't wait to leave. I was shocked. I thought I'd hidden it so well, but she said she could feel it. The silence at dinner, the way we never touched, the way we existed in separate worlds under the same roof. She said it made her sad, made her determined to never settle for that kind of marriage. I thought I was protecting them by staying. I was just teaching them that loveless marriages were normal, that people stay in situations that make them miserable. That's not a lesson I wanted to pass down. But I did. If you're reading this and you're in a marriage that's dead, I need you to hear me. Leave. I know it's scary. I know it's hard. I know everyone will have opinions. I know you might struggle financially. I know you might be alone for a while. I know it will be painful, but it will not be as painful as staying. It will not be as painful as spending 40 years sleeping next to someone who doesn't love you. It will not be as painful as waking up at 81 and realizing you traded your entire life for the appearance of stability. You deserve more. You deserve to be loved. You deserve passion and connection and someone who sees you. And if you can't have that, you at least deserve the freedom to be yourself, to not have to perform, to not have to pretend, to not have to disappear. I thought leaving would be the end of the world, but staying was the end of me. I'm 81 now. I have maybe 5 years left, maybe 10 if I'm lucky, and I'm finally free. But I'm also mostly alone. My kids visit sometimes. My grandkids call. But they have their own lives, and I have this quiet house and all these regrets. I think about what I could have done with those 51 years. I could have traveled, I could have had a career, I could have dated, I could have fallen in love for real, I could have had friendships that mattered, hobbies that fulfilled me, a life that was mine. Instead, I have memories of silence, of dinners where nobody spoke, of sleeping on the far edge of the bed, of holidays that felt like obligations, of anniversaries that felt like funerals, of watching television in separate rooms, of going to bed alone even though someone was sleeping next to me. That's what I have, and I can't do anything about it now. I'm too old, too tired, too late. The years are gone. The chances are gone. All I have left is time to think about what I lost. But you're not. If you're 30, 40, 50, even 60, you still have time. Not endless time, but enough. Enough to start over. Enough to find out who you are outside of a marriage that's killing you. Enough to maybe, possibly find real love. Or at least find peace. I never had peace, not until Robert died. And that's a terrible thing to admit, that I didn't feel peace until my husband was gone. But it's the truth. Please don't wait until your spouse dies to finally feel relief. Don't spend your whole life in a prison. Don't make the same mistake I did. I thought staying was the brave thing. I thought leaving was selfish. I had it backwards. Leaving would have been brave. Staying was just fear, and it cost me everything. I'm running out of time to say this, but you're not running out of time to hear it. You still have years, decades maybe. Please don't waste them the way I did. Life is so short. Even when you live to 81, it's stunningly short. And spending it in a loveless marriage is a special kind of tragedy. Because you're not really living. You're just existing, counting down the days until it's over. That's not a life. That's a slow death. I know that now. I wish I'd known it at 38, or 45, or 52, or even 65. I wish I'd been brave enough to leave, to choose myself, to believe I deserved more than polite distance and decades of loneliness. But I wasn't. And now it's too late for me. But it's not too late for you, so please, if your marriage is dead, let it die. Don't drag it on for another year, another decade, another lifetime. You deserve better. You deserve love. Real love. The kind that sees you, knows you, chooses you. And if you can't have love, you deserve freedom. The freedom to be yourself, to discover who you are when you're not performing, to find joy in your own company, to build a life that's actually yours. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until you're 81 to finally be free, because by then there's almost nothing left, just regrets. and time you can't get back, and the ghost of the person you might have been. If you'd been brave enough to leave, I'm telling you this because no one told me, because I want you to know what I didn't. That staying in a loveless marriage doesn't make you strong. It makes you invisible, and life is too short, too precious, too fleeting to spend it being invisible.